Hello again, this is Marxist, and welcome to episode 4 of my Learning from the Classics series. We'll be watching more Mix-Up and Quantic on Badlands from Season 10 ESEA LAN. And if you're looking for an earlier part of this series, then there will be an annotation below you can click on to take you back in time and see what you've missed. Otherwise, we'll get started. If you'll remember from the end of the last video, Quantic is sitting at mid, which they just capped, and they have Uber advantage and are getting ready to push on to Mix-Up. Mix-Up's very close at choke, which isn't generally suggested by 9 out of 10 physicians when you're at an Uber disadvantage like they have. But Mix-Up's going to execute one of my all-time favorite plays in an attempt to ablate Quantic's Uber and take mid. So what happened here is that Mix-Up saw Quantic was pushing through the flank, and they just gathered in choke and then pushed through. And because Quantic wasn't really expecting it, they sort of get picked off one by one because they don't deal with it in an organized way. They come in one by one and fight a big group of Mix-Up players who are hiding behind crates and things to make themselves harder to hit. This is a really high-risk play, but that's part of what makes it so cool. Because if Harb dies, they're probably going to lose the round. If something happens that there's a sticky trap at choke or a bunch of people waiting at choke, they're going to lose the round. If somebody's capping Spire during this and the Uber manages to slow down the capping of mid, they're going to lose the round. So it's just such a cool play to see. You know, some people get off on air shots or meat shots, but rat plays are one of my favorite things to see in TF2. Also, you'll note Harb gets popped right at the end, so that's at least going to save Quantic their second. So we're going to see it go into a stalemate. So it didn't turn into a complete roll, because Harb could have had Uber, and that probably would have just gone straight to last and ended the game. In our second situation, we'll be watching Clockwork at middle for Quantic, with the game 4-3 in Mix-Up's favor. So we'll see Quantic getting ready to go to mid here. Clockwork's going to come out of house and go through the window and pop out onto the Hoodoo. Spam a few shots at Plat, nothing really too big. Banny hits an air shot on Relic. And then he plays sort of a nice passive mid here. And then backs up, gets this health pack really quick, comes back in, sees a Harblue, and then kills him. I flipped the camera around here to show... Because Mix-Up players are alive, everyone's looking at every door. What we saw was a passive mid from Clockwork where he took care to stay alive and to deliver damage when he could. It's a passive mid, so it's not really something that he's super famous for. But it works out, because Mix-Up ends up giving really early frags to them and then sort of just falls into disarray. It also shows Clockwork backed up at some points because he already knew they were going to win mid and that his team was okay. So you don't always have to fully commit yourself, especially if you know you're winning or that people aren't going to die without you. But that's really the only case where that's okay. So after that mid, Quantic gets set up to push last with their Uber advantage. Being an advantage push, Quantic's going to bring in more than one player on their Uber, obviously, but they're also aware of another little something, and that's that Enigma is running a Pyro. And this is a clear demonstration of how you should always deal with the team that's trying to run a Pyro against you at last. We're going to see Sizer take an Uber into this Pyro. Banny ends up getting the kill, but that's not particularly important. And then Sizer is just going to wait on the sticks to be cleared off the point, and they're going for kills in this case. Banny hits some nice shots, and they get the round. So what happened? Sizer and Banny is the best possible team in a scout and a demo for taking care of a Pyro. Mix-Up needed that Pyro to keep the Uber out, so Harb had a chance to get his. But if a scout and a demo ends up shooting at your Pyro, there's nothing in the world that Pyro can accomplish. He's going to knock him around a little bit, but as long as they hit their shots, the Pyro is completely dead, especially when there's an Uber involved. Then, Quantic uses the second method for pushing points, which is instead of having somebody die on the point and det the stickies, bringing the opposing team down to defend the point, they just go ahead and get kills. Platt dies, there are no stickies on point, and then 2 scouts just walk on, and Banny uses his projectiles to keep anybody from dropping down at that point. In situation 4, we'll be watching Mix-Up's medic Horriblue go to middle for the final time in this match. So we're going to see the whole medic roll out here. Just to sort of show you what ought to happen as a med player, what you should ask of your team. And Mix-Up's going to opt to go for a very old style house rollout. You don't really see this very often either, just like the choke rollout. Platt gets thrown back into house, and Horriblue wants to heal him anyways. But now Mix-Up's in pretty bad shape, and Platt goes down. He meets his pocket TLR in choke, and they just skedaddle out of there. So what happened? Mix-Up went for a more passive style rollout, which is coming through the house. The only more passive options are sitting in the valley, not going up, or going through choke. So they went for a little bit of a more passive strategy because Quantic had been playing quite passive the last 2 mids, and it had worked out in their favor both times. So they go for something a little different. However, Quantic came out aggressively this time, and if you come out of the house and they all bomb your train car, you have a likelihood of getting stuck in the house, and that's exactly what happened to Platt and Harb. And it's hard to win a mid when your demo's stuck in the house, not really able to do a whole lot. So, and TLR got knocked out through choke, basically. So Mix-Up gets locked out, and it's absolutely essential that they get Harb out alive, so as to not lose the round because CB is still alive. In our 5th situation, we're going to be watching TLR hold in trash, what's commonly known as trash, with almost Uber and a numbers disadvantage. TLR's in trash, he sees Banny peek up over there, he's got to get back. Damages the soldier a little on the spire, and the Uber from Quantic comes into him. He jumps to spire to try and get Mackie away, he jumps down on Banny to try and deal with him. And then he starts falling back because he needs to reload, and also because Horriblue is afraid of that soldier, which is dealt with. What we saw there was TLR utilizing positioning in order to get the Uber out of Quantic, who wanted to get the Uber out of them. They wanted to get rid of Horriblue's Uber on second rather than having him sit at last with it and make them push a last, which is hard. TLR backs up, doesn't get overwhelmed, gets Banny to go away because CB doesn't want to flash. Then he goes and deals damage to anyone that's not Ubered. Harb is safe. He's invincible. TLR doesn't need to deal with him anymore. Then, after he uses all of his rockets and passes some pretty good damage to Quantic's Roamer and Demo, he backs up to get Horriblue into a better position because you don't want your medic wandering around by himself. And Mackie drops down to finish off Horriblue, and TLR happens to be there when that happens because of his smart decisions, and they end up killing Mackie. And now all that's left up for Quantic are 2 scouts, and Mix-Up's got Uber advantage now, and they're for sure going to get mid. In our 6th situation, we're going to be watching Mix-Up push last with Uber advantage to win the game. So Mix-Up's going to come in from main, lower, and TLR's going to jump to the right immediately. Platt follows him in. Harb goes for a big play and tries to get some time on the point, and they drop down, and Mix-Up gets decimated by Banny, who drops down to stop the point. Mix-Up fails a push that ought to have been pretty easy. And what happened there was TLR jumps the right because most teams have a lot of people up there, and he figured he could get good damage and start getting kills. Mix-Up doesn't put a lot of pressure on the point early. Horriblue realizes that they aren't getting the frags that they need, so somebody has to put pressure on the point now so that the sticks will be dead and they can try and pull Quantic down into what remains of their Uber. So he pulls out his saw for a split second to make it look like there's someone on the point, and then goes back to his Uber gun as quickly as he can so he doesn't die in the sticky trap and totally blow it for his team. It's a big play, and it almost sort of kind of worked out. And then Banny, who still stayed on the high ground and did not drop down into that situation until it became imperative, manages to finish off the push. In situation 7, we see Mix-Up execute what I call a faux push. They've since been pushed back to mid after their failed Uber. and they're faking a push-in to get CB's Uber out over Spire instead of allowing Quantic to use it to push mid. It's a very high-risk play for Mix-Up, and they do get the Uber out, and now all they have to do is escape, and they'll get their Uber advantage to push Spire with. However, they end up losing 2 people, one of which is Plat, and they get burnt by it. What Mix-Up intended to do there was force CB on second, and make it really hard for Quantic to push mid, and then Harb would have his Uber advantage, and they'd use that to push Spire. It doesn't work out because Platinum goes down, and they're going to lose mid in that case. Harb's still alive. He's going to have Uber advantage now, and they're going to push back to mid with it, hopefully, in the grand scheme of things. But the play that they attempted to execute is really, really interesting. It's one of those things that you ought to try out in scrims, because if you know a team has Uber advantage and they're going to push into you, and you're not, say, at last or at your own second, where it'd be a disaster if it doesn't work out, this is a really interesting play to try, because if you take their Uber away from them and then they can't push anymore, you're going to end up constantly frustrating their ability to push, and a lot of teams won't be able to deal with that. Because a lot of teams tend to only push when they have Uber, and if you keep taking it away from them when they're just sitting there defending, it's going to give you a lot of initiative. That being said, it is pretty risky, and it takes a high level of coordination. After that, Quantic rushes down Harblue and kills him, and then takes second. Now they're set up to push last with full Uber advantage and 3 players down from Mix-Up, who attempted to sort of go for a Spire defense. Quantic's pushing with Uber advantage, and they're going to bring a ton of people into the Uber, and Sizer sneaks in there and caps. And that's how the game was won. Sizer recognized that Mix-Up was likely being 3 down, probably had 3 players huddled around Harblue, because that's what teams tend to do when they don't want to lose LAN matches. And he just snuck in there as the Uber came and blocked them from coming down and stopping Sizer from capping. It reminded me of like a screenplay in football where you just put the Uber between the opposing team and the point and run a scout on it. And that finished off the game with Quantic winning 5-4. And probably, I strongly encourage you to watch the cast, and what was probably one of the most fun games of TF2 I've ever seen, and without a doubt the best Badlands match I've seen. So hopefully you enjoyed, and I hope you join me next time when I'll be looking at a different match on a different map, probably also from Season 10, just because I want to start at Season 10 looking at some of the stuff that used to be done then. Just because I find it to be pretty interesting that some of it's gone away or isn't really brought up anymore, even though it's still pretty good play and tactics. So if I get enough of these done, maybe someday I'll get to I-49 and that kind of stuff. But I want to start out with older material first and work my way forward. So, I hope you enjoy, and this has been Marxist. Until next time.